The gun was already aimed at her heart when Arya Bennett realized she'd been sold. Not metaphorically, not politically. Literally sold, like merchandise, like property, like the countless others her father had trafficked through his empire for decades. The difference? She knew every secret he'd buried, every body, every lie. And now, standing in a cathedral meant for her perfect stepsister, facing a Korean mafia boss whose reputation made senators weep, Arya understood one truth. She wasn't the backup bride. She was the payment. The question wasn't whether she'd survive this. It was whether she'd burn the whole world down trying. Before we begin, if you're ready for a story of vengeance, power, and a woman who refused to stay invisible, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far Arya's story reaches. Now, let's begin. The explosion happened at 4:47 a.m. Arya Bennett was 3 floors below her stepsister's penthouse suite when the windows blew out, raining glass onto Madison Avenue like crystalline snow. She didn't flinch, didn't run, just stood there in the pre-dawn darkness, phone pressed to her ear, listening to her father's chief of security confirm what she'd already known for 6 hours. "She's gone, Ms. Bennett. Cleaned out everything. The money, the files, even the—" "I know what she took, Marcus." Arya's voice was flat, clinical. 28 years of practice had taught her to drain emotion from her words like poison from a wound. "What I need to know is whether he knows yet." Silence. Then, "The groom's plane lands in 40 minutes. Arya closed her eyes. 40 minutes. That's all the time she had before Kang Jae-hyun discovered his bride had vanished with $400 million of his money and enough classified intelligence to destabilize 3 governments. 40 minutes before the most dangerous man in the criminal underworld realized he'd been played, and Senator Richard Bennett's entire political empire collapsed in the aftermath. "Wake my father," Arya said. "Tell him his favorite daughter just committed career suicide, for both of them." She ended the call and looked up at the gutted penthouse. Smoke poured from the windows, Celestia's parting gift. Always dramatic, always theatrical. Even her exit had to make the morning news. My stepsister, the bride. My stepsister, the thief. My stepsister, the girl who just signed all our death warrants. Arya turned away from the building and started walking. Her phone buzzed incessantly. Texts, calls, emergency alerts. She ignored them all. There was only one place she needed to be now, only one conversation that mattered. The cathedral was 12 blocks away. The wedding was scheduled for noon. And somewhere between this moment and then, Arya Bennett, the invisible daughter, the fixer, the ghost who'd spent her entire life cleaning up other people's messes, was about to become the mess herself. She just didn't know it yet. The Bennett estate in Connecticut looked like something from a political dynasty fairy tale. White columns, manicured lawns, American flags positioned at mathematically precise intervals. Arya had always hated it. Too much performance, too much pretense. The real business happened in the basement, in rooms with soundproofing and encrypted servers, where her father built his empire on the backs of people who'd never see sunlight again. She found him in his study, already dressed in his father of the bride tuxedo. At 63, Richard Bennett still looked like a senator from Central Casting. Silver hair, strong jaw, eyes that could sell compassion to cameras while calculating profit margins. He was on the phone, his voice that perfect blend of concern and authority. "Assure you, Mr. Kang, this is simply a minor delay. My daughter is dealing with last-minute nerves, completely understandable, given the—" Arya walked straight to his desk and placed a single photograph face-up on the leather surface. Her father's words died mid-sentence. The photo showed Celestia at a private airstrip in Teterboro, boarding a jet with 4 large cases. Timestamp, 11:34 p.m. Behind her, barely visible in the frame, was a man Arya had spent 3 weeks identifying, Viktor Kozlov, arms dealer, human trafficker, and one of Jae-hyun's oldest enemies. Richard Bennett's face went white, then red, then a shade of purple. Arya had only seen twice before. Once when a blackmail scheme fell apart, once when an FBI investigation got too close. "I'll call you back," he said into the phone, voice strangled. He didn't wait for a response before ending the call. The study fell silent except for the antique clock on the mantel. Tick, tick, tick. Tell me, Richard finally said, that this isn't what it looks like. It's worse. Arya sat down in the chair across from him, crossing her legs with deliberate calm. She didn't just run. She took the complete financial records for your offshore network. Every account, every transaction, every name. She paused, including the trafficking operations. Her father's hand trembled as he reached for the crystal decanter of whiskey. Didn't bother with a glass, just drank straight from the bottle. How much time do we have? His plane landed 20 minutes ago. He's probably at the cathedral now. Jesus Christ! Richard slammed the decanter down. Do you have any idea what this man will do? What he's capable of? Arya had spent 6 months researching Kang Jae-hyun. She knew exactly what he was capable of. The newspapers called him a businessman, a philanthropist, a cultural bridge between Korea and America. The truth was far simpler and infinitely more terrifying. He was a king. Not of a country, but of an empire that spanned continents, smuggling routes, weapons networks, information brokers. He controlled senators and CEOs with equal ease, made people disappear so thoroughly their own families forgot they existed, and Celestia had stolen from him. I know what he'll do, Arya said quietly. The question is what you're going to do. Her father stared at her like he'd never seen her before. Maybe he hadn't. Arya had spent her entire life being invisible in this family. The daughter from the affair, the reminder of his sins, useful only for her ability to make problems disappear. Celestia was the star. Beautiful, charismatic, perfect. The daughter he paraded at fundraisers and family photos. The daughter he'd promised to Kang Jae-hyun as part of a business deal Arya still didn't fully understand. We'll find her, Richard said, reaching for his phone. I'll mobilize every resource we have. Marcus can... She's gone, Dad. She's been planning this for months, maybe years. Arya leaned forward. You're not going to find her, not before Jae-hyun tears this family apart looking for what she stole. Then what do you suggest? His voice cracked. You're the fixer. Fix this. Arya had known this moment was coming since the moment she saw that photograph, had known it in her bones, in the part of her that understood her father better than he understood himself. She was about to say the words that would change everything, and she felt nothing. No fear, no hesitation, just the cold, clear logic of someone who'd accepted her fate before the trap had even closed. There's only one thing he'll accept in exchange for what Celestia took, she said. A replacement bride. Richard Bennett went very still. No, he whispered. Yes. Arya, you can't possibly. I can. And I will. She stood up, smoothing her black dress. But not for free. Her father stared at her. What? If I'm going to marry a monster to save your empire, I want something in return. Arya's voice was ice. Full access to all your accounts. Complete transparency on every business operation. And when this is over, when I've recovered what Celestia stole and cleaned up this mess, I walk away. No strings, no obligations. You'll never contact me again. You're insane. He'll kill you the moment he realizes, maybe. Arya moved toward the door. But at least I'll die knowing I was worth something to you, even if it's just as a bargaining chip. She was halfway down the hall when her father called out. Arya, wait. She didn't turn around. Why are you doing this? Really? The question hung in the air between them. Arya could give him a dozen answers, because someone had to clean up Celestia's mess, because the alternative was watching everything burn, because 28 years of invisibility had taught her that her only value was in being useful. But the truth was simpler and far more painful. Because no one else will, she said. They never do. The Cathedral of St. Michael stood in downtown Manhattan like a monument to old money and older sins. Arya arrived at 10:15 a.m. in a black town car, wearing the same dress she'd planned to wear as a guest. She hadn't gone home to change, hadn't packed a bag, hadn't said goodbye to anyone because there was no one to say goodbye to. Her father would arrive separately after making the necessary calls. The story would be simple. Celestia had fallen ill, a sudden emergency, her younger sister stepping in to save the day. The press would eat it up. The society pages would praise the Bennett family's dedication, and Kang Jae-hyun would know it was all a lie. Marcus met her at a side entrance, his expression grim. He's inside, waiting. Anyone else? 20 of his men, all armed. Marcus hesitated. Miss Bennett, you don't have to do this. We can find another way. Arya almost laughed. Marcus had been her father's head of security for 15 years. He'd overseen operations that destroyed lives, disappeared evidence, silenced witnesses, and now he was concerned about her well-being? Yes, I do, she said. And we both know there is no other way. The cathedral was empty except for the wedding party that wasn't. No guests, no photographers, no flower arrangements or string quartets, just cold marble floors and stained glass windows that filtered the morning light into shards of color. And at the altar, waiting with the patience of a predator, was Kang Jae-hyun. Arya's first thought was that the photographs hadn't done him justice. They'd captured his face, sharp cheekbones, dark eyes, the kind of beauty that belonged in museums or on currency. But they hadn't captured his presence. The way he occupied space like gravity itself bent around him. The absolute stillness that only came from complete confidence in one's ability to destroy anything that moved wrong. He was 36, dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than most cars. His hands were clasped loosely in front of him. He didn't turn when she entered, but she knew he was aware of her. Every instinct screamed that this man missed nothing. Her father entered behind her, and that's when Jae-hyun finally moved, turned, looked. His eyes went to Richard first, then slid to Arya. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, he studied her with the kind of attention usually reserved for contracts or crime scenes. Then he spoke, his voice accented but precise. This is not the woman I agreed to marry. Mr. Kang, if I could explain, Richard began. I don't require explanations from you, Senator. Jae-hyun's gaze never left Arya. I require honesty, so let me ask directly. Where is Celestia Bennett? The cathedral went silent. Arya felt her father's panic like humidity in the air. This was the moment, the point of no return. She stepped forward, out of her father's shadow, and met Jae-hyun's eyes. Gone, she said simply. With $400 million, a server full of classified intelligence, and probably a new identity by now, she's not coming back. Her father made a strangled sound. Jae-hyun's expression didn't change, didn't even flicker. And you are? Arya Bennett, the other daughter, the one who actually knows where all the bodies are buried. She took another step closer. Celestia was beautiful, charismatic, perfect for photographs and small talk, but she didn't know anything about the real business. I do. I've been managing my father's complications since I was 17. Arya, what are you... Richard grabbed her arm. She shook him off without breaking eye contact with Jae-hyun. I know about the routes through Singapore and Prague. I know about the shell companies in the Caymans. I know which senators are on your payroll and which ones just think they are. And I know exactly what my sister took from you, because I built half the systems she hacked to steal it. For the first time, something moved behind Jae-hyun's eyes. Interest, or maybe calculation, hard to tell which. You're offering yourself as a replacement, he said. It wasn't a question. I'm offering myself as an upgrade. Arya's voice was steady. Celestia would have been a pretty face at parties. I can be a partner, help you recover what she stole, track her down, dismantle whatever she's planning with Kozlov. How did you know about Kozlov? Because I'm good at my job, which is making problems disappear. She paused. So here's my question, Mr. Kang. Do you want a bride, or do you want your empire back? The silence that followed felt like standing on a frozen lake, listening for the crack. Jae-hyun studied her with those dark, unreadable eyes. Then, without warning, he smiled. It was not a comforting expression. Your father told me Celestia was an asset, he said. Beautiful, connected, malleable, easy to control. He moved closer, each step deliberate. You're none of those things, are you, Miss Bennett? No, Arya said. I'm not. What are you then? She thought about all the years of being invisible, all the messes she'd cleaned, all the secrets she'd buried, all the time she'd been useful instead of loved. Necessary, she said. Jae-hyun stopped directly in front of her. This close, she could see the scar along his jaw, faint but unmistakable. could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive, could feel the danger radiating off him like heat. "If I agree to this," he said quietly, "understand that there is no going back. Marriage to me is not temporary, not negotiable, not survivable if you prove to be a liability." "I understand. Do you?" He tilted his head slightly. "I don't think you do. Your sister didn't just steal money, Ms. Bennett. She stole information about operations that keep very dangerous people alive. If that information reaches the wrong hands, wars will start. People will die. Not dozens, thousands." His voice dropped lower. "And I will do anything, destroy anyone, to get it back, including you, especially you, if you prove to be as foolish as your sister." Arya felt her pulse quicken, but kept her expression neutral. "Then it's a good thing I'm not my sister." For a long moment they stood there, two people who understood exactly what kind of devil's bargain they were making. Then Jae-hyun turned to her father. "You have 1 hour to make this legal. Marriage license, contract modifications, everything." His voice was ice. "After that, she belongs to me. And you, Senator, will have no further contact with either of us until I say otherwise." Richard Bennett, for perhaps the first time in his political career, had nothing to say. Jae-hyun looked back at Arya. "Get ready. We marry at noon." He walked away, his men following like shadows. The cathedral doors closed behind them with a sound like a tomb ceiling. Arya's father grabbed her shoulders. "What have you done? Do you have any idea what you've just agreed to?" She removed his hands carefully. "I've agreed to clean up your mess, like always. This is different. This isn't some PR crisis or leaked email. This is your life, your freedom." "I've never been free, Dad." "Not really." She smoothed her dress, suddenly exhausted. "At least this way I'm choosing my cage." The hour passed in a blur of paperwork and legal proceedings that felt more like a hostage negotiation than a wedding preparation. Lawyers appeared from nowhere, contracts were modified, signatures were exchanged. Arya barely read any of it. The specifics didn't matter. She was property being transferred from one owner to another, dressed up in legal language. At 11:45, a woman appeared in the side chapel where Arya waited. She was elegant, Korean, probably in her 50s, and carried a garment bag with the care of someone handling explosives. "I'm Mrs. Huang," she said in perfect English. "Mr. Kong sent me." "You can't wear that." She gestured at Arya's black dress. "I didn't exactly have time to go shopping." "Of course not." Mrs. Huang unzipped the garment bag, revealing a wedding dress that made Arya's breath catch. It was nothing like the elaborate monstrosity Celestia had chosen. This was simpler, sleeker, more architectural. White silk with subtle structure, beautiful but not fragile. A dress for someone who might need to run or fight in it. "He chose this?" Arya asked. "He keeps options." Mrs. Huang's expression was carefully neutral. "For contingencies." "Right. Because this was business, not romance, not even preference, just preparation for every possible scenario." Arya changed without ceremony. The dress fit perfectly. Of course it did. Men like Jae-hyun didn't leave details to chance. Mrs. Huang fixed her hair in a simple knot, applied minimal makeup, then stepped back to assess. "You'll do," she said. Then, more quietly, "For what it's worth, Ms. Bennett, I've worked for Mr. Kang for 12 years. He is many things. Dangerous, ruthless, unforgiving of betrayal." She paused. "But he is not cruel without reason. Remember that. It wasn't comfort, exactly. But it wasn't nothing either." At exactly noon, the cathedral doors opened. Arya walked down the aisle alone. No father to give her away, no pretense that this was anything but what it was. A transaction, an exchange, a desperate play to prevent total annihilation. Jae-hyun waited at the altar with a priest who looked like he'd performed stranger ceremonies in stranger places. His expression was unreadable as Arya approached. Didn't smile, didn't frown, just watched her with those dark eyes that seemed to catalog every detail. When she reached him, he offered his hand. She took it. His grip was warm, firm, and utterly controlled. The ceremony was brief. Vows were exchanged, traditional words that felt like lies, promises neither of them intended to keep. When the priest pronounced them married, Jae-hyun kissed her. It was clinical, performative, over in seconds. His lips barely touched hers. And yet Arya felt the promise in it. The warning. The declaration of ownership. When he pulled back, he kept hold of her hand. "Come," he said. "We leave immediately." "Leave? For where?" "My home. You live there now." "Of course. No honeymoon, no celebration, just extraction and relocation." Arya glanced back once at her father, standing in the shadows at the back of the cathedral. He looked old suddenly, smaller, diminished. She felt nothing looking at him. No love, no anger, no regret. Just relief that she'd never have to see him again. But Jae-hyun's home turned out to be a fortress disguised as a penthouse. 20 floors above Manhattan, bulletproof windows, security that made the Pentagon look casual. Arya counted at least 15 armed guards between the elevator and the front door. All of them Korean. All of them watching her like she might explode at any moment. "Your things will arrive tomorrow," Jae-hyun said, leading her through a space that was more museum than residence. "Until then, everything you need is provided." "I don't have things," Arya said. "I didn't pack." He glanced at her. "You left with nothing?" "I had nothing worth taking." Something flickered across his face. Surprise? Interest? Then vanished. He stopped in front of a set of double doors. "Your room. Mine is across the hall. We'll maintain appearances of a marriage, but I don't require your presence in my bed." His tone was matter-of-fact. "This is a business arrangement. I have no interest in forcing intimacy." Arya should have felt relieved. Instead, she just felt tired. "Good to know I haven't married a complete monster." "Don't mistake pragmatism for mercy, Ms. Bennett." He opened the doors, revealing a bedroom larger than her entire apartment. "I'm still a monster. I'm just a practical one." He left her there, doors closing with a soft click. Arya stood in the center of the room, still wearing her wedding dress, and tried to process what had just happened. 12 hours ago, she'd been invisible. Now she was married to one of the most dangerous men in the world, living in a fortress, and somehow expected to track down her psychotic stepsister while navigating an empire built on violence. She started laughing, couldn't help it. The sound echoed in the enormous room, sharp, slightly hysterical, the laughter of someone who'd finally cracked. When the laughter died, she walked to the window. Manhattan spread out below her, glittering and oblivious. Somewhere in that city, or maybe far beyond it, Celestia was probably celebrating her escape. Probably thought she'd won. Arya pressed her hand against the bulletproof glass. "Enjoy it while it lasts, sister," she whispered, "because I'm coming for you. And when I find you, you're going to wish you'd killed me when you had the chance." Behind her, the door opened. She didn't turn. "Second thoughts already?" Jae-hyun's voice. "No," Arya said. "Just making a promise." He moved to stand beside her, also looking out at the city. "To whom?" "To myself." She finally looked at him. "When do we start hunting her?" "Tonight. I have her last known location, a warehouse in Red Hook, Viktor Kozlov's territory." He paused. "It will be dangerous." "Everything about this is dangerous," Arya said. "Might as well get started." For the first time since they'd met, Jae-hyun looked at her with something other than calculation, something almost like respect. "Change your clothes," he said. "Wear black, comfortable shoes. And Miss Bennett?" "Arya," she corrected. "If we're married, you might as well use my name." "Arya, then." He moved toward the door, then stopped. "What you did today, offering yourself in your sister's place, was either very brave or very stupid. Can't it be both?" He almost smiled. Almost. "We'll find out." When he left, Arya returned to staring at the city. Somewhere out there, a war was beginning. A hunt, a reckoning. And for the first time in her invisible life, Arya Bennett was going to be seen. Whether that meant salvation or destruction remained to be discovered. At 9 p.m., Arya stood in front of her new husband wearing tactical pants, a black shirt, and boots that felt more like weapons than footwear. Mrs. Huang had provided them without question, along with a Kevlar vest that fit like it had been made for her. "How did you know my size?" Arya asked. "Mr. Kang knows everything about everyone he does business with," Mrs. Huang replied. "He had your measurements before your father even proposed the marriage." Of course he did. Jae Hyun didn't leave anything to chance. She found him in what could only be called a war room, multiple screens showing feeds from cameras across the city, maps marked with routes and locations, a table covered in weapons that ranged from elegant to terrifying. He was dressed similarly to her, all black, checking the magazine of a handgun with practiced efficiency. "Can you shoot?" he asked without looking up. "Yes." "Have you ever shot at a person?" "No." "Good. Don't start tonight unless I tell you to." He holstered the weapon and finally looked at her. His gaze swept over her tactical gear with approval. "You'll stay close to me. You'll do exactly what I say, when I say it. If I tell you to run, you run. If I tell you to hide, you hide. Understood?" "I'm not a child, Jae-hyun." "No, but you're untested in this kind of operation, and I won't have your death on my conscience our first night together." He moved closer. "Your sister stole from me. She conspired with my enemies, but she's still your blood. If we find her tonight and I need to end this quickly, will you be able to watch that? Or will you become a liability?" Arya met his stare without flinching. "Celestia stopped being my sister the moment she sold me out to save herself. If you need to kill her, I'll hand you the gun." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Good. Let's go." The warehouse in Red Hook looked abandoned. Broken windows, rusted doors, graffiti covering every surface. But Arya had been reading building security long enough to spot the signs. Fresh tire tracks in the dirt. A camera hidden in the eaves. Motion sensors disguised as debris. "It's occupied," she murmured. "I know." Jae-hyun signaled his men, 6 of them, all moving like shadows. "Kozlov uses this place for storage, weapons, mostly. But intelligence suggests your sister met him here 3 nights ago." They breached the building through a side entrance, silent and methodical. Inside the warehouse was a maze of shipping containers and wooden crates. Arya's heart hammered, but she kept her breathing steady, stayed close to Jae-hyun like he'd ordered. They found the office on the 2nd floor, and inside they found evidence. Photographs of Celestia and Kozlov, financial transfers, shipping manifests, and something else, a list of names. Politicians, businessmen, foreign operatives, all of them connected to her father's trafficking network. "She's not just running," Arya said, scanning the documents. "She's building something, a competing operation." "Or exposing the existing one," Jae-hyun said grimly. He pulled out his phone, photographed everything. "This isn't about the money. She's going to war." A sound from below, footsteps, voices. Jae-hyun's hand went to his weapon. "We're not alone." They barely made it to the exit before gunfire erupted. Bullets shredded the air, punched through metal, sent Arya diving behind a container while Jae-hyun returned fire with lethal precision. She pressed herself against the cold steel, ears ringing, mind racing through escape routes and probability calculations. "Move!" Jae-hyun grabbed her arm, pulled her toward a window. Glass shattered around them as they dropped to the fire escape, bullets chasing them down 3 flights of rusted metal. They hit the ground running. Behind them, the warehouse erupted in chaos, shouts, more gunfire, the roar of engines. Jae-hyun's car was waiting, driven by one of his men. They threw themselves inside, tires screaming as they peeled away from the scene. Arya's hands were shaking. She pressed them against her knees, willing them to be still. "Are you hurt?" Jae-hyun asked, breathing hard. "No, you?" "I'm fine." He was checking his phone, reading something that made his expression darken. "We have a problem." "Bigger than being shot at?" "Yes." He showed her the screen. It was a news alert. "Breaking. Senator Richard Bennett's daughter missing. Feared kidnapped." Arya's stomach dropped. "What?" "Your father just held a press conference. He's claiming Celestia was kidnapped this morning, that he's received ransom demands, that he's working with the FBI." Jae-hyun's voice was ice. "He's using your sister's disappearance as a cover, making himself the victim." "That bastard!" Arya's shock hardened into fury. He's trying to get ahead of the story, control the narrative before the truth comes out, which means he knows more about Celestia's plans than he told us. Ye-hyun stared out the window. And he's willing to sacrifice both of you to save himself. The car drove through Manhattan streets that suddenly felt like enemy territory. Arya's mind spun through implications and consequences. Her father had just made her disappearance public knowledge, which meant questions would be asked, investigations would start, the marriage to Jae-hyun would come out, unless they made it look like something else. "We need to give him a different story," she said suddenly. Jae-hyun looked at her. "What do you mean? He wants a kidnapping? Let's give him one. A marriage that looks like it was forced, me as the victim, you as the monster who took advantage of the chaos." She was thinking fast now, the way she always did when problems needed solving. "It protects your reputation, explains my disappearance, and gives us cover to hunt Celestia without public scrutiny. You want me to pretend to be your kidnapper? I want us to control the story before it controls us." Arya turned to face him fully. "You said this marriage was a business arrangement. Well, this is business. Optics, strategy, things I'm actually good at." Jae-hyun was silent for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Really smiled, not the cold calculation from before. "You're more interesting than I expected, Arya Bennett." "It's Arya Kang now," she corrected. "Might as well commit to the lie." "Very well, Arya Kang." He pulled out his phone again. "I'll make some calls. By tomorrow morning, the story will be that I took you as insurance for your sister's debt. Your father will play the devastated parent. You'll be the tragic victim." He paused. "And together, we'll hunt the real villain while everyone's looking the wrong way." Arya nodded, feeling something settle in her chest. This was familiar territory. Manipulation. Misdirection. Making chaos look like order. For the first time since this nightmare began, she felt like she had some control. The car pulled into the underground garage of Jae-hyun's building. As they rode the elevator up to the penthouse, Arya caught their reflection in the mirrored walls. A dangerous man and a desperate woman, both wearing secrets like armor. "What happens tomorrow?" she asked. "Tomorrow, we make you look like a hostage." Jae-hyun's reflection met hers. "And then we start dismantling your sister's network piece by piece until she has nowhere left to hide. And when we find her? Then we make her pay for every second of chaos she's caused." His voice was cold. "In blood, if necessary." The elevator opened to the penthouse. Arya stepped out, still shaking slightly from the adrenaline, still processing everything that had happened in one impossible day. "Get some sleep," Jae-hyun said. "Tomorrow will be difficult." "They're all difficult now," Arya replied. She went to her room, closed the door, and finally let herself feel the full weight of what she'd done. Married a stranger. Become a pawn in a war between criminals. Painted a target on her back that would never disappear. But as she stood there in the darkness, Arya realized something else. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. People would be looking for her now, talking about her, trying to understand her. And when they did, when the dust settled and the truth emerged, they would see exactly what she'd always been. Not a victim, not a pawn, not invisible. Necessary. Arya changed out of her tactical gear and lay down on the bed, still dressed, staring at the ceiling. Outside, Manhattan hummed with its millions of lives, oblivious to the war beginning in its shadows. Somewhere out there, Celestia was planning her next move, and Arya would be ready. Because this wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't about her father's empire or Jae-hyun's reputation. This was about proving that the invisible daughter was the most dangerous one of all. And Celestia was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Arya woke to the sound of helicopters. Not close, somewhere over the East River, maybe circling the financial district. But close enough that the rhythmic thump of rotors pulled her from a sleep that had been more collapse than rest. She lay still for a moment, disoriented by the unfamiliar ceiling, the too soft bed, the complete absence of city noise that her old apartment had always leaked like a sieve. Then yesterday crashed back. The wedding, the warehouse, the gunfire, the marriage. She sat up, still wearing yesterday's clothes, and checked her phone. 6:47 a.m. 32 missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize. 14 text messages, all from reporters. and one email from her father's office with the subject line, "Statement regarding recent events." She deleted it without reading. The penthouse was silent as she emerged from her room, padding barefoot across marble floors that probably cost more than her entire education. She found Jae-hyun in the kitchen, or what passed for a kitchen in a space designed more for show than function. He was drinking coffee, watching 3 different news broadcasts on mounted screens, all with the sound off. "You're awake," he said without turning around. "Good. We have a situation." "Just one?" Arya moved to the coffee maker, desperately needing caffeine. "Your father held another press conference an hour ago." Jae-hyun gestured to the center screen, where Richard Bennett stood behind a podium, looking appropriately devastated. "He's offering a $10 million reward for information about your whereabouts. Claims he received a ransom demand from my organization." Arya paused mid-pour. "He what?" "He's playing it perfectly. Grief-stricken father, innocent victim, willing to do anything to get his daughters back." Jae-hyun's voice was clinical, almost admiring. "The FBI is officially investigating. Your face is on every news station in the country, and I'm now America's most wanted kidnapper." She should have expected this. Her father never did anything without 3 backup plans and an exit strategy. But the speed of it, the audacity, he'd turned her replacement marriage into a national tragedy in less than 24 hours. "So what do we do?" she asked. "We give them what they want to see." Jae-hyun finally looked at her, and his expression was unreadable. "Get dressed. Something that looks like you've been held captive. We're going to make a video." 30 minutes later, Arya sat in a room that had been staged to look like a basement. Concrete walls, a single chair, harsh overhead lighting. Jae-hyun stood behind the camera with one of his men, a tech specialist named Min Jun, who looked barely old enough to drive but handled the equipment like a surgeon. "Remember," Jae-hyun said, "you're supposed to be terrified, desperate. You need to make them believe you're in danger." Arya almost laughed. She'd been in danger her entire life, just a different kind. The kind that came with silk gloves and political smiles. But she understood what he needed: performance, theater, the appearance of victimhood. "I'm ready," she said. The camera light went red. Arya let her shoulders slump, made her eyes wide and glassy. When she spoke, her voice trembled just enough. "Dad, if you're watching this, I'm okay. I'm not hurt. But these people, they say Celestia stole something from them. They want it back. They want her back." She paused, let a tear slide down her cheek. "Please, just give them what they want. I don't want to die for her mistakes." Jae-hyun made a cutting motion. The camera stopped. "Perfect," he said quietly. "That will buy us time. Make your father look reasonable if he negotiates, and give us cover to operate." "You're going to send that to him?" "No, I'm going to leak it to 3 different news outlets in 6 hours. Let them find it. Makes it look more authentic." "But..." He nodded to Min Jun, who was already uploading the file to encrypted servers. "By tonight, every person in this city will think you're my hostage." Arya stood up, wiping away the fake tear. "And what's the actual plan? We can't just hide here forever." "No, but we can use the chaos to our advantage." Jae-hyun moved to a wall screen, pulled up a map of the eastern seaboard. "The documents we found last night, I've had my analysts working on them. Your sister isn't working alone. She has a network, at least 12 different cells operating out of 6 cities. He tapped the screen, and locations lit up. New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Miami, New Orleans. "She's building an empire," Arya said, studying the map. "Using Dad's infrastructure as a foundation." "Exactly. But she made a mistake." Jae-hyun zoomed in on Miami. 3 days ago, one of Kozlov's shipments arrived at Port Miami. Manifests listed it as industrial equipment, but our sources say it was human cargo. 70 people, mostly women, trafficked from Eastern Europe. Arya's stomach turned. "Celestia's involved in trafficking?" "Not just involved, running it." Jae-hyun's voice was ice. "Your sister isn't just a thief, Arya. She's a monster. And she's using your father's political connections to legitimize her operation." The coffee in Arya's stomach turned to acid. She'd known her father was dirty, had known about the money laundering, the bribery, the evidence tampering, but trafficking, moving human beings like cargo? She'd suspected, had seen hints in encrypted files and offshore accounts, but had never confirmed it. And Celestia hadn't just known about it. She'd taken it over. "Where are they now?" Arya asked, her voice hollow. "The people from the shipment. Dispersed, sold, gone." Jae-hyun's jaw tightened. "But we have a lead on the next shipment. It arrives in New Orleans in 4 days. And intelligence suggests your sister will be there personally to oversee the transfer." Arya's head snapped up. "You want to use it as bait? I want to end this, quickly, permanently." He turned to face her fully. "But I need to know you can handle what that means. Because what we're about to do, it's not legal. It's barely moral. And if we're successful, people will die." She thought about the 70 people who'd already been sold, about the hundreds or thousands more who would follow if Celestia wasn't stopped, about her own role in maintaining the system that made all of this possible. "Tell me what you need," she said. Over the next 3 days, Arya learned what it meant to be married to Kang Jae-hyun. It meant 18-hour days in the war room, tracking shipments and money transfers across a dozen countries. It meant conference calls at 3 a.m. with informants who spoke in coded language and never showed their faces. It meant watching security footage of warehouses and ports until her eyes burned, looking for patterns that might reveal Celestia's location. But it also meant seeing how Jae-hyun's empire actually operated. And it wasn't what she'd expected. Yes, there were weapons. Yes, there was violence. But there was also a code. Rules that his people followed with religious devotion. No trafficking, no drugs, no preying on the vulnerable. Jae-hyun's organization moved money, information, and influence, but never human beings. "You look surprised," he said one evening, catching her staring at a file detailing his organization's structure. "I am," Arya admitted. "I expected something different." "You expected a monster." He poured himself whiskey, didn't offer her any. "Most people do, but monsters are inefficient. They attract attention, create chaos, burn out quickly." He took a sip. "I prefer sustainability. Long-term power over short-term satisfaction." "Is that why you agreed to marry Celestia? Sustainability?" "I agreed to marry Celestia because your father offered me something I wanted. Political legitimacy. Access to networks I couldn't otherwise penetrate." He studied her over the rim of his glass. "What I got instead was you, which might actually be more valuable. Because I know where the bodies are buried. Because you think like I do." He set down the glass. "Celestia was raised to be decorative. You were raised to be useful. There's a difference." Arya felt something uncomfortable twist in her chest. Not quite pleasure at the compliment, but close. Dangerous territory. "Don't mistake professional respect for anything else," she said carefully. "I won't if you won't." Jae-hyun's eyes held hers. "We're partners in this, Arya. Nothing more, nothing less. The moment you become a liability, this arrangement ends." "Understood." But that night, lying in her too-large bed, Arya wondered if either of them actually believed that. The leaked video hit the news cycle exactly as planned. Within hours, it was everywhere: cable news, social media, international outlets. The FBI issued a statement. Her father gave another tearful interview. Hashtags trended. The world watched and waited. And in the chaos, nobody noticed when Arya and Jae-hyun boarded a private plane to New Orleans. They arrived at night, the city spread below them like jewels on black velvet. Arya had been to New Orleans once before, on a campaign trip with her father. She remembered heat and music and crowds that felt alive in ways New York never did. This trip would be different. Jae-hyun had people in New Orleans, a network of informants and operatives who moved through the city like ghosts. One of them, a woman named Camille, met them at a safe house in the warehouse district. "The shipment arrives tomorrow at midnight," Camille said, spreading maps across a table. She was maybe 40, with sharp eyes and hands that never stopped moving. "Port of New Orleans, berth 7. Kozlov's people are handling logistics, but word is someone important is coming to supervise." "Celestia," Arya said. "That's the assumption." Camille glanced at her. "You've seen the manifests?" Arya hadn't. Jae-hyun handed her a tablet. She scanned the documents, her blood going cold as she read. 83 people this time. ages ranging from 16 to 34, destinations listed as private sales. "We're not letting the shipment leave that port," Jae-hyun said flatly. "Agreed," Camille replied, "but extraction is complicated. Kozlov has at least 20 men on site. Harbor Patrol is paid to look the other way. And if your sister is really there, she'll have her own security." "Then we need an advantage." Arya was thinking, her mind already sorting through possibilities. "What if we give them a reason to panic, force them to move the shipment early, somewhere less secure?" Jae-hyun looked at her. "What are you suggesting?" "A tip to the FBI. Anonymous. About suspicious activity at Berth 7. She was building the plan as she spoke. "They can't ignore it. Not with all the media attention on trafficking right now. Kozlov and Celestia will have to relocate fast. And when they do, we'll be waiting," Jae-hyun finished. A slow smile spread across his face. "You're learning." They spent the next 12 hours preparing. Camille's people scouted alternative locations where Kozlov might move the shipment. Jae-hyun coordinated with his security team, planning extraction routes and backup positions. And Arya made the anonymous tip using a burner phone and a voice modulator, reporting suspicious shipping container activity with just enough detail to trigger an investigation. By 10 p.m., FBI and local police were swarming Berth 7. And by 11 p.m., Camille's scouts confirmed movement at a private warehouse in Algiers, across the river. "That's it," Camille said, watching the surveillance feed. 3 trucks, heavy cargo. And look. She zoomed in on a figure stepping out of a black SUV. Arya's breath stopped. Celestia. Even through the grainy footage, her stepsister was unmistakable. Blonde hair pulled back, wearing designer clothes completely inappropriate for a criminal operation, moving with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. "She's there," Arya whispered. "Then let's go get her." Jae-hyun was already moving, checking weapons, issuing orders in rapid Korean to his team. Arya grabbed his arm. "Wait! If we go in guns blazing, people will die. The people in those containers, they're victims. We can't just—" "I know." His voice was hard but not unkind. "That's why you're staying here." "Like hell I am." "Arya, I'm not a child, and I'm not fragile." She met his stare without flinching. "You brought me here because I'm useful, so let me be useful." For a long moment, they stood there, locked in a battle of wills. Then Jae-hyun's expression shifted into something almost like respect. "Fine, but you follow my orders exactly. No improvisation, no heroics." He handed her a small handgun. "And if I tell you to run, you run. Understood?" "Understood." The warehouse in Algiers was a hulking metal structure that probably dated back to the shipping boom of the 50s. Rusted siding, broken windows, surrounded by a chain-link fence that had seen better decades. But the security was modern: cameras, motion sensors, armed guards patrolling the perimeter. Jae-hyun's team moved like water, flowing around obstacles, eliminating guards with silent efficiency that made Arya's stomach turn. She'd seen violence before, but only in aftermath. News reports, crime scene photos. Never like this. Never up close. They entered through a loading bay, moving through shadows and shipping containers stacked like building blocks. Arya could hear voices ahead, Russian, maybe Ukrainian, male, aggressive. Then she heard something else. Crying. Soft, muffled, terrified. The people in the containers. Jae-hyun signaled his team to split up. Half would secure the perimeter. Half would come with them to find Celestia. Arya stayed close to him, her heart hammering so hard she was sure someone would hear it. They found her in an office on the 2nd floor. Celestia sat behind a desk like she was conducting a corporate meeting, reviewing documents with a man who had to be Kozlov, 50s, built like a boxer, face that had seen violence and enjoyed it. 2 guards flanked the door. Celestia was laughing at something Kozlov had said, utterly relaxed, completely oblivious. Until Jae-hyun kicked open the door. Everything happened in seconds. The guards reached for weapons. Jae-hyun's men were faster. Gunfire cracked in the enclosed space, deafening. One guard dropped, the other dove for cover. Kozlov pulled a gun from his desk drawer. And Celestia saw Arya. For one frozen moment, their eyes met. Shock flashed across Celestia's perfect features. Then calculation. Then something that might have been fear.
Arya? Her voice was disbelieving. How are you? Shut up, Jaehyun said coldly. He had a gun pointed at Kozlov, who'd frozen mid-draw. Both of you, on your knees. You have no idea what you're interrupting, Kozlov growled. This is a business transaction, legal and sanctioned. Legal, Arya finally found her voice. You're trafficking human beings. I'm providing labor for willing contracts, Kozlov corrected. Everything is documented. Documented lies. Jaehyun moved closer. Where are the others? The people from the Miami shipment? Kozlov smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Gone. Distributed. Working off their debts. Arya felt rage bloom in her chest, hot and acidic. They're not debts, they're people. Spoken like someone who's never been desperate. Celestia stood up slowly, hands raised. Really, Arya, when did you develop a conscience? You spent years helping Dad bury evidence of operations just like this. I didn't know the extent. You knew enough. Celestia's voice was sharp. You knew and you looked the other way because it was easier. Because you were good at pretending problems didn't exist. She glanced at Jaehyun. And now you're what? Married to the competition? Playing hero? I'm stopping you, Arya said quietly. You can't. Celestia's confidence was absolute. This operation has reach you can't imagine. Politicians, judges, law enforcement in 6 states. Even if you kill me right now, it continues. Then we'll dismantle it piece by piece, Jae-hyun said, starting with you. That's when the explosion hit. The wall of the office blew inward, showering debris and flame. Arya felt herself thrown backward, ears ringing, vision swimming. Through the smoke and chaos, she saw figures moving, armed men, too many to count, pouring through the breach. Someone grabbed her arm. Jaehyun, his face streaked with blood, pulling her toward a back exit. Gunfire erupted from all directions. One of his men went down. Then another. Move! Jaehyun shoved her through a doorway, returned fire, covering their retreat. They ran through a maze of catwalks and storage areas, pursued by voices and bullets. Arya's lungs burned. Her mind struggled to process what had happened. The explosion had been planned, coordinated, which meant it was a trap, she gasped. Celestia knew we were coming. Probably. Jaehyun kicked open a door, checked the stairwell beyond, which means we have a leak. They made it to the ground floor where Camille was waiting with a car. But as they ran toward it, Arya saw something that made her stop dead. The shipping containers. They were open, and people were running, dozens of them, pouring out into the night, confused and terrified but free. Your people did that, Camille said, seeing Arya's expression. Jae-hyun's orders. First priority was always releasing them. Arya looked at her husband. He was bleeding from a cut above his eye, breathing hard, but his expression was calm. I told you, he said. I'm not a monster. They got in the car. Behind them, the warehouse burned, sirens wailed, and chaos reigned. But as they sped away through New Orleans streets, Arya realized something crucial. Celestia had escaped. Again. And this time, she'd proven she was 3 steps ahead. Back at the safe house, Jae-hyun's team assessed damages. 2 men dead, 3 wounded. Kozlov had disappeared in the chaos. And Celestia was gone, probably already on her way to the next location in her network. We failed, Arya said numbly. No. Jae-hyun was cleaning his weapons, methodical despite his injuries. We freed 83 people. We burned a major node in their operation, and we confirmed Celestia is willing to kill to protect her empire. He looked at her. That's not failure. That's intelligence. She knew we were coming. How? Someone in my organization is feeding her information. His voice was ice. Or someone in yours. Arya's stomach dropped. My father. It's possible. He has access to FBI resources now, with the investigation. He could be tracking us. Jae-hyun paused. Or it could be someone else entirely. Either way, we can't trust our normal channels. So what do we do? He was quiet for a long moment, staring at something Arya couldn't see.
Then, we make them come to us. How? By giving them something they can't resist. He pulled out his phone, opened a secure messaging app. Your father's gala, the annual fundraiser. It's in 3 days, yes? Arya nodded. The Senator Bennett Foundation Gala was the social event of the season in New York. Politicians, billionaires, celebrities, everyone who was anyone attended. It was her father's crown jewel, his showcase of power and influence. Celestia will be there, Jae-hyun said. She won't be able to resist. All those contacts, all that potential business, she'll come. But everyone thinks I'm kidnapped. If I show up, you won't. Not as yourself. A slow smile spread across his face. But there are ways to be present without being seen. And if we're very careful, very smart, we can end this. All of it. Your father's empire, Celestia's operation, all the rot underneath. Arya felt something cold settle in her chest. Understanding maybe, or recognition of what he was really suggesting. You want to expose everything, publicly, in front of everyone who matters. I want to burn it down, Jae-hyun corrected, and make sure it never grows back. He extended his hand, not a wedding gesture, a partnership. Are you ready to destroy your father's world, Arya Kang? She thought about the people in those containers, about the years of looking the other way, about the invisible girl she'd been and the weapon she'd become. She took his hand. Let's end this. The plane touched down at Teterboro just after midnight, wheels kissing tarmac in a city that never stopped watching. Arya stared through the window at the Manhattan skyline, lit up like a promise or a threat, and wondered which version of herself she'd be when this was over, if there was an after, if she survived what came next. Jae-hyun was already on his phone coordinating with his team in rapid Korean. She caught fragments, surveillance, access points, backup protocols. The language of men who planned for every contingency, who turned chaos into choreography. Minjun has the equipment ready, he said, ending the call. We'll start tomorrow. You'll need to memorize everything about the venue. Every exit, every camera, every place where things could go wrong. I grew up going to that gala, Arya said. I could navigate it blindfolded. Good. Because in a way, you will be. He looked at her, and something in his expression had changed since New Orleans. Less calculating, more dangerous. What we're about to do, there's no going back from it. You understand that? She did. Once they exposed her father's empire in front of New York's elite, once they burned down the facade of legitimacy that had taken him decades to build, the fallout would be nuclear. Investigations, arrests, testimony, blood. I understand, she said. Do you? Jae-hyun leaned closer. Because you'll be destroying your own legacy too. Everything connected to the Bennett name will be toxic, including you. The Bennett name was already toxic. I was just too useful to notice. Arya met his gaze. Besides, I'm a Kang now, remember? Something flickered across his face. Not quite a smile, something harder to name. Yes, he said quietly. You are. The penthouse felt different when they returned. Less like a cage, more like a war room. Jae-hyun's people had transformed the main living area into an operations center. Screens showing surveillance feeds, maps marked with routes and positions, tables covered in equipment that ranged from elegant to terrifying. Mrs. Huang was waiting, looking exhausted but composed. Everything is prepared, she said, though I still think this plan is insane. Noted, Jae-hyun replied. Show her. Mrs. Huang led Arya to a side room that had been converted into something between a dressing room and a tech lab. On a mannequin stood an evening gown, black and devastating, the kind of dress that costs more than most cars. But it wasn't the dress that made Arya's breath catch. It was what Mrs. Huang held up next. A mask. Not a simple domino mask or costume piece, but something sophisticated and strange. Translucent material that would cover most of her face, embedded with microcircuitry so fine it was barely visible. Active camouflage, Mrs. Huang explained. It won't make you invisible, but it will distort facial recognition software. Cameras won't be able to get a clear image, and to the human eye, You'll look like someone else. Not completely different, but enough that no one will recognize you as Arya Bennett. How is that possible? Light refraction, digital interference, and some technology I'm not cleared to fully explain. Mrs. Huang set the mask down carefully. You'll also have this. She held up what looked like an elegant bracelet, silver and understated. Communication device, GPS tracker, and emergency beacon. If anything goes wrong, you press here. She indicated a small stone. And Jae-hyun's team will extract you within 90 seconds. Arya touched the mask, feeling the strange texture. And what exactly am I supposed to do once I'm inside? Plant evidence, Jae-hyun said from the doorway. Your father keeps his real records in his private study at the venue, the Foundation headquarters. Top floor behind security that thinks it's impenetrable. How do you know that? Because I've been planning to destroy him long before you became my wife. His voice was matter-of-fact. The marriage to Celestia was always a cover, a way to get close, gain access, learn the systems. What I didn't expect was for her to burn it all down first. He moved into the room. Or for you to be the one to help me finish it. Arya processed this. The entire courtship, the political alliance, the carefully orchestrated wedding, all of it had been a con. Jae-hyun had been planning to betray her father from the beginning. You were going to destroy him anyway, she said, with or without me. Yes, but with you it's cleaner, more complete. He picked up the mask, studying it. You know where he keeps the backup files? The ones that prove the trafficking operation, the money laundering, the bribes. You've seen them. She had. In moments of carelessness or arrogance, her father had let her glimpse the true scope of his empire, had trusted that his invisible daughter would stay invisible, would never become a threat. He'd been wrong. I'll need 30 minutes in that study, Arya said. Maybe 40. You'll have 20. After that, security patterns shift. Jae-hyun handed her the mask. Try it on. The mask settled over her face like a second skin, cool and almost weightless. Arya turned to the mirror and felt her stomach drop. The woman looking back was familiar, but wrong. Her features were still there. Same eyes, same bone structure, but distorted somehow. Like looking at herself through warped glass. Her mind insisted this was her reflection, but her instincts screamed stranger. It's disturbing, she said. It's effective. Jae-hyun stood behind her, his reflection equally strange in the mask's reality-bending field. The human brain will struggle to remember what you look like. Even if someone stares directly at you, 10 minutes later, they won't be able to describe your face. Mrs. Huang handed her the dress. You should rest. Tomorrow, we rehearse. The day after, you'll need to be perfect. Perfect. Arya had spent her life trying to be invisible, and now she needed to be perfect. The irony wasn't lost on her. She spent the next day memorizing floor plans, practicing with the mask, running through scenarios with Jae-hyun's team. Min-jun showed her how to hack her father's security system, a process that required bypassing 3 different authentication protocols and spoofing biometric readers. Your father is paranoid, Min-jun said, impressed despite himself. This is military-grade protection for a charity foundation. He's protecting an empire, not a charity, Arya replied, watching code scroll across the screen. The foundation is just the front. She learned the timing of guard rotations, the blind spots in camera coverage, the precise sequence of moves she'd need to execute. 20 minutes to get in, access the files, plant the evidence that would trigger automatic uploads to every major news outlet simultaneously. 20 minutes to make her father's world burn. If everything went according to plan. But plans, Arya was learning, were just pretty lies people told themselves before reality intervened. The night before the gala, Jae-hyun found her on the balcony, staring at Manhattan's glittering sprawl. The city looked peaceful from up here, beautiful even. She knew it was an illusion. At street level, the city was all noise and chaos and desperate people making desperate choices. Not unlike her. Can't sleep? He asked. Didn't try. Arya didn't look at him. Do you think she'll actually be there, Celestia? Yes, she's too arrogant not to be. This is her victory lap. Jae-hyun leaned against the railing. She thinks she's won, thinks she's outmaneuvered everyone. She'll want to show her face, prove she's untouchable. And when we expose everything, When the truth comes out, then she becomes what she's always been, a criminal, a trafficker, a monster without a mask. He paused. Like your father. Arya finally looked at him. You really hate him, don't you? Hate is too emotional. I don't hate him. I just believe men like him shouldn't exist. Jae-hyun's voice was cold. He sells people, treats human beings like inventory, and he does it while shaking hands with presidents and donating to children's hospitals. That kind of hypocrisy needs to be eliminated. And what about you? Arya asked quietly. You've killed people, run criminal operations. You're not exactly innocent. I never claimed to be. He turned to face her fully. But I have rules, lines I don't cross. Your father has no lines, only profit margins. My father? Arya echoed. The words felt strange, distant, like talking about a stranger. After tomorrow, I won't have a father anymore. No, you won't. Jae-hyun's expression softened slightly. Will you miss him? She thought about it, really thought. About childhood memories that were more absence than presence. About the way her father looked through her instead of at her. About all the years of being useful instead of loved. No, she said. I don't think I will. They stood in silence for a moment, two people who'd married for survival and somehow become partners in destruction. Then Jae-hyun did something unexpected. He reached out and touched her hand, just briefly. Tomorrow changes everything, he said, for both of us. I know. Are you afraid? Arya considered lying, considered playing the role of the fearless operative, the cold professional. But something about the night, the city, the moment, made her choose honesty instead. Terrified, she admitted. Good. Jae-hyun squeezed her hand once, then let go. Fear keeps you sharp. Overconfidence is what gets you killed. He went back inside, leaving Arya alone with the city and her thoughts. Tomorrow night, she'd walk into her father's kingdom wearing a mask and carrying weapons made of truth. Tomorrow night, she'd either destroy everything or be destroyed trying. Either way, the invisible daughter was about to become very, very visible. The day of the gala dawned gray and threatening, clouds hanging over Manhattan like a premonition. Arya woke early, her mind already racing through the plan, checking for flaws, testing for weaknesses. She found a dozen possible points of failure and no good alternatives. They'd either succeed or they wouldn't. Binary. Final. Mrs. Huang arrived at noon with the dress, already steamed and perfect. Jae-hyun wants you to eat something, she said. You'll need your strength. I'm not hungry. Eat anyway. Mrs. Huang's tone left no room for argument. Passing out from low blood sugar would be a stupid way to fail. Fair point. Arya forced down eggs and toast that tasted like cardboard, her stomach tight with nerves. Jae-hyun was in the war room, making final adjustments to the plan. She could hear him talking to his team, his voice calm and authoritative. He sounded the way she imagined generals sounded before battles. Confident. Prepared. Absolutely certain they were right. She hoped he was. At 4 p.m., Min-jun arrived to go over the tech one final time. The bracelet, the mask, the tiny earpiece that would keep her connected to Jae-hyun throughout the operation. He made her practice the emergency beacon 3 times until she could trigger it without looking. Remember, he said, once you're inside, you're alone. We can't help you if things go wrong. The security is too tight, too many witnesses. You have to be smart, be fast, and be gone before anyone realizes what happened. No pressure, Arya said dryly. Actually, all the pressure. Min-jun's expression was serious. But Jae-hyun trusts you, that's not nothing. After he left, Arya stood in front of the mirror and stared at her reflection. Still herself. Still visible. In a few hours, she'd put on the mask and become someone else. Someone brave enough to do what needed doing. She just hoped that person was real. Jae-hyun knocked at 6. When she opened the door, she found him in a tuxedo, looking like he'd stepped out of a fashion magazine or a very expensive thriller. His hair was styled differently, his usual intensity muted behind a facade of cultured elegance. He looked like someone who belonged at elite galas. Someone harmless. Arya knew better.
You clean up well, she said. So do you. His gaze swept over her dress, clinical and assessing. The mask? She picked it up from the dresser, that strange translucent film that would make her unmemorable. Ready? Then let's go destroy your father's world.
The Foundation headquarters occupied a historic building in Midtown, all marble columns and gilded excess. Arya had attended the gala every year since she was 16, always invisible among the crowd, always watching from the margins while Celestia sparkled in the center of attention. She knew every inch of this place, every hidden corner, every secret. Tonight, she'd use all of it. Jaehyun arrived separately in a chauffeured car, playing the role of legitimate businessman. He'd received an invitation months ago, back when the marriage to Celestia was still the plan. His attendance would raise eyebrows given the current kidnapping situation, but that was the point. Create confusion. Make people focus on him while Arya moved through the shadows. She entered through the service entrance at 8, wearing the mask and a staff uniform Mrs. Huang had acquired. The distortion effect was immediate. Security guards glanced at her and looked away, their brains refusing to fully process what they saw. She moved through the kitchen, down service corridors, heading for the private elevator that led to the top floor. "I'm in," she murmured, the earpiece picking up her voice. "Copy that." Jaehyun's voice was steady in her ear. "Gala is filling up. Your father just arrived. No sign of Celestia yet." Arya reached the elevator, swiped the stolen keycard Min-jun had cloned, and pressed the button for the 15th floor. The doors closed. She was alone. Her father's private study was exactly as she remembered. Dark wood, leather furniture, walls lined with books he'd never read. Trophies of intellectual pretension. But behind the antique desk, hidden in plain sight, was what she'd come for. The safe was biometric, requiring both fingerprint and retinal scan. Impossible to crack. Unless you'd spent 6 months secretly collecting your father's biometric data and programming it into a spoofing device that cost more than most houses. Arya pressed her thumb to the scanner. It read the fake print Min-jun had embedded in a thin film. Green light. She leaned forward for the retinal scan, holding her eye open while the device read the copied pattern from her contact lens. Another green light. The safe clicked open. Inside were 3 hard drives and a leather portfolio. Arya pulled them out carefully, her hand steady despite her racing heart. The drives contained everything: financial records, communications, evidence of transactions that would make federal prosecutors weep with joy. The portfolio held hard copies, photographs, documents, proof. She connected the first drive to her phone, initiating the upload Min-jun had programmed. Files began transferring to secure servers that would automatically distribute them to news outlets at midnight. Journalists would wake up to the story of the decade hand-delivered to their inboxes. "Upload initiated," she whispered. 60 seconds. "Good." Hae-hyun's voice. "But we have a problem. Celestia just arrived, and she's heading for the private floors." Arya's blood went cold. "What?" "She must know something. She's moving fast with security. You need to finish and get out. Now." The upload bar crawled across her screen. 45 seconds remaining. Arya grabbed the second drive, started a parallel upload. The portfolio she photographed page by page, her phone camera capturing evidence in rapid succession. 30 seconds. Footsteps in the hallway outside. Voices. Celestia's laugh, bright and familiar and wrong. 20 seconds. The door handle turned. Arya grabbed the drives, shoved them back in the safe, closed it. The uploads were still running, pulling data remotely now. She dove behind the desk just as the door opened. "I'm telling you, something feels off." Celestia's voice closer than expected. "Why would Jaehyun show up here tonight? It's too bold, even for him." "Perhaps he believes he's untouchable." A male voice. Russian accent. Kozlov. "Men with power often do." They entered the study. Arya pressed herself against the desk's back panel, barely breathing, praying the mask's distortion field would work if they saw her. Maybe. Celestia moved to the window, her heels clicking on hardwood. Or maybe he's here for something else, someone else. "Your sister is dead." Kozlov's voice was cold. "You saw the reports. The FBI found remains matching her description." "What?" Arya's mind reeled. They'd planted a body? Staged her death?
I know what the reports say. Celestia sounded irritated. But Arya was always slippery, hard to pin down. I wouldn't put it past her to fake her own death. Why would she do that? To destroy me. Destroy Dad. She always hated that she was invisible. Celestia's laugh was bitter. Poor tragic Arya, always in my shadow. I almost feel sorry for her. Almost. The word settled in Arya's chest like a stone. The upload is complete. Jae-hyun's voice in her ear, barely audible. Get out. Now! But Celestia was between her and the door. Arya scanned the room, looking for alternatives. The window was bulletproof, sealed. The air vent was too small. There was no way out that didn't involve being seen, unless she stopped hiding. Arya stood up. The effect was immediate. Celestia spun, her eyes going wide. Kozlov reached for a weapon. For a moment, they all froze. Tableau of mutual shock. Then Celestia's expression shifted from surprise to something darker. Recognition fighting with impossibility. Arya? Her voice was a whisper. Hello, sister. Arya removed the mask slowly, letting her face become clear. Surprised? Celestia's hand flew to her mouth. You're alive. But the FBI said what I wanted them to say. Arya's voice was ice. What Jae-hyun wanted them to say. Funny how easy it is to fool people when you control the information. Kozlov raised his gun, pointing it directly at Arya's chest. You're making a mistake, Ms. Bennett. I don't think I am. Arya didn't look at the weapon, kept her eyes on Celestia. I think I'm finally fixing all the mistakes I've made. All the times I looked the other way. All the people I failed to save because I was too busy being invisible. You don't understand what you're interfering with, Celestia said, finding her voice. This operation is bigger than Dad, bigger than any of us. You can't just... I already did. Arya held up her phone, showing the upload confirmation. Every file in that safe, every piece of evidence, every name, sent to 15 different news organizations. By midnight, the entire world will know what you are. Celestia's face went white, then red, then a shade of purple that reminded Arya sickeningly of their father. You stupid, stupid girl. Celestia's voice shook with rage. Do you have any idea what you've done? The people this will expose, they'll kill us. They'll kill everyone connected to this. Good. Arya felt calm. Strangely, perfectly calm. Maybe they should have thought of that before trafficking human beings. Kozlov stepped forward, gun steady. You're not leaving this room. Actually, she is. Jae-hyun's voice came from the doorway, and he wasn't alone. 6 of his men, all armed, all pointed at Kozlov. Lower your weapon, now! For a long moment, Kozlov considered his options. Then, slowly, he lowered the gun. Jae-hyun moved to Arya's side, his presence solid and reassuring. Are you hurt? No. She couldn't look away from Celestia. Just tired of running. Then let's finish this. Jae-hyun turned to Celestia. Your empire is over. By tomorrow, federal agents will be arresting everyone in your network. Your father will be in custody. And you? He smiled, cold and final. You'll spend the rest of your life in a cell, surrounded by the same kind of people you trafficked. I think that's fitting. Celestia laughed. It was a horrible sound, sharp and breaking. You think you've won? You think exposing this changes anything? She looked at Arya. They'll come for you too. Everyone you implicated, everyone who loses power because of what you did. They'll hunt you, and they won't stop until you're dead. Let them try, Arya said quietly. Jae-hyun's men secured Celestia and Kozlov, zip-tying their hands with professional efficiency. As they led them away, Celestia looked back once, her expression something between hatred and disbelief. You were always weak, Arya, always the one who needed saving. Arya met her sister's eyes. No, I was always the one doing the saving. You just never noticed. Then Celestia was gone, dragged away by men who answered to Arya's husband. The study fell silent except for the sound of sirens, distant but growing closer. We need to move, Jae-hyun said. The FBI will be here soon. The uploads triggered their systems. What about the gala? About to get very interesting. He took her hand. Come on. We need to be downstairs for the finale.
They descended in the private elevator, Arya's heart pounding with adrenaline and something that felt dangerously like triumph. They'd done it. Exposed the Empire. Captured Celestia. Now came the hardest part. The gala was in full swing when they reached the mezzanine level, hundreds of New York's elite mingling below. Arya spotted her father immediately, Senator Richard Bennett, holding court near the champagne fountain, laughing at someone's joke, playing the role of gracious host. He had no idea his world was about to end. "The uploads go live in 3 minutes, Jae-hyun murmured. "Every phone in this room will light up simultaneously. Breaking news alerts, emergency notifications." "And my father?" "Will realize he's finished." Jae-hyun checked his watch. 2 minutes. Arya stared down at the gathering, at the wealth and power and privilege concentrated in one room. These were the people who'd enabled her father's empire, who'd looked the other way, who'd benefited from the suffering of people they'd never have to see. "I want to be there," she said. "When he realizes. I want him to see me." Jae-hyun looked at her, something unreadable in his expression. Then he nodded. "Stay close." They moved through the crowd, Arya still wearing the mask that made her forgettable. She removed it as they approached her father, wanting him to see clearly, wanting him to understand who had destroyed him. Richard Bennett saw her at exactly the moment his phone buzzed. His expression went from confusion to recognition to absolute horror in the space of a heartbeat. Around them, phones were lighting up, buzzing, chiming. People were reading headlines that would change everything. Senator Bennett's trafficking empire exposed. Foundation scandal. Evidence reveals decades of human trafficking. Breaking. FBI raids Bennett Foundation headquarters. Her father's face drained of color. The champagne flute slipped from his hand, shattering on marble floor. Every eye in the room turned to him, and Arya stepped forward, close enough that only he could hear her words. "Hello, Dad," she said softly. "I told you I'd clean up your mess. I just didn't mention I'd do it by burning everything down." Richard Bennett stared at his invisible daughter, finally seeing her, finally understanding. "Arya," he whispered, "what have you done?" She smiled. It was not a kind expression. "What was necessary?" Then the FBI burst through the doors, weapons drawn, voices shouting commands. Chaos erupted. Guests screamed. Security moved. Cameras flashed. And in the center of it all, Senator Richard Bennett stood frozen, watching his empire collapse in real time. Jae-hyun pulled Arya back, shielding her from the chaos. They moved toward a service exit, leaving the destruction behind. But Arya looked back once, watching federal agents surround her father, reading him his rights. She felt nothing. No satisfaction, no grief. Just emptiness where a father's love should have been. "It's done," Jae-hyun said quietly. "Not yet," Arya replied. "There's still one more thing." She pulled out her phone, opened a live stream. The gala was already trending worldwide, footage of the raid spreading across social media like wildfire. But Arya had one more truth to share. She started recording, her face clear and unmistakable. "My name is Arya Bennett," she said to the camera, "and I'm the daughter who exposed my father's trafficking empire. Everything you're seeing tonight, I made it happen. Not because I'm brave, not because I'm good, but because I finally stopped being invisible." She ended the recording, posted it, watched it go viral in seconds. Behind them, sirens wailed. Ahead of them, the night waited. Jae-hyun offered his hand. "Ready?" Arya took it. "For what?" "Whatever comes next." They walked out into Manhattan's chaos together, two people who'd married as strangers and become partners in destruction. The city sprawled around them, indifferent and eternal. Somewhere in that city, people were being freed, evidence was being secured, justice was beginning, and Arya Bennett, invisible no more, was finally terribly free. The safe house was in Brooklyn, buried in a neighborhood where gentrification met old-world resistance, and nobody asked questions about the people who came and went at odd hours. Arya sat by the window watching dawn break over the city, her phone buzzing incessantly with notifications she refused to read. The world was waking up to what she'd done, and she couldn't bring herself to care about their reactions. Jae-hyun found her there an hour later, carrying coffee and looking like he'd actually slept. She envied him that. Arya hadn't closed her eyes since they'd left the gala, her mind too wired, replaying every moment. "The FBI has your father in custody," he said, handing her the coffee. "Along with 14 others from the gala. Celestia and Kozlov are in separate facilities. They're all lawyering up, but with the evidence you released, it won't matter." Arya took a sip, tasting nothing. "Good. Is it?" Jaehyun sat down across from her. "You don't sound convinced. I destroyed my family, exposed people who will want me dead, made myself the most famous whistleblower in the country." She finally looked at him. "I should feel something, right? Satisfaction? Regret? Anything?" "You feel what you feel, or don't." He studied her with those dark, unreadable eyes. "There's no correct emotional response to patricide." "I didn't kill him. You killed who he was, what he built. Same thing." Jaehyun leaned back. "Your video has 40 million views. The story is on every network. They're calling you a hero." Arya laughed, sharp and bitter. "A hero, right, because heroes marry criminals to save their own skin. You married me to stop a trafficker and dismantle a corrupt empire. That's closer to heroism than most people get." He paused. "Though you're right about the criminal part." Something in his tone made her look up. "What's wrong?" "We have a problem." Jaehyun pulled out his phone, showed her a news alert. 3 of the people you exposed were found dead this morning, before the FBI could arrest them. Arya's stomach dropped. "How?" "Professionally. Execution style." His expression was grim. "Someone is cleaning house, eliminating anyone who might talk." "Who would—" But she already knew. "There are others, people higher up the chain we didn't expose." "Yes. And they're protecting themselves." Jaehyun swiped through more reports. 2 senators, 1 federal judge, and multiple CEOs. All connected to your father's network. All suddenly unreachable. They're running. Or preparing to strike back. He stood, moving to the window beside her. "You didn't just expose a trafficking ring, Arya. You exposed a power structure that's existed for decades. People who thought they were untouchable. They won't accept this quietly." As if summoning them, Arya's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her press accept. "Miss Bennett." The voice was male, cultured, with an accent she couldn't place. "Or should I say Mrs. Kang? Congratulations on your very public revelation." "Who is this?" "Someone you've made very angry. Someone who lost a great deal of money when you destroyed your father's operation." A pause. "Someone who knows where you are right now." Arya's blood went cold. Jaehyun heard the shift in her expression, immediately went on alert. "What do you want?" she asked. "Simple. You have 72 hours to recant everything. Tell the media you fabricated the evidence, that you were coerced by Kang Jae-hyun, that your father is innocent. And if I don't, then we'll kill everyone you've ever cared about, starting with the people you freed from those containers in New Orleans." The voice was pleasant, conversational. "We still have their names, their families. 83 people who thought they were safe. They're not." The call ended. Arya sat frozen, the phone slipping from her hand. Jaehyun caught it, checked the number, then made a call of his own in rapid Korean. When he finished, his expression was dark. "They're serious," he said. "I know that voice. Mikhail Volkov, Russian oligarch, deep connections to the trafficking network. He's not bluffing about the people from New Orleans." "Then what do we do?" "We find him first." Jaehyun was already moving, grabbing equipment, issuing orders to people Arya couldn't see. "And we end this before he can make good on his threats." "How? We don't even know where he is." "Yes, we do." He pulled up a map on his tablet. "Volkov owns the estate in the Catskills, private, heavily guarded. He'll be there, thinking he's safe." Jaehyun's smile was cold. "He's wrong." Arya stood, her exhaustion burning away into something sharper. "When do we leave?" "We don't. I leave. You stay here where it's safe." "Absolutely not." She moved to stand in front of him. "Those people, the ones he's threatening, I'm the reason they're in danger. I'm not hiding while you clean up my mess." "This isn't about pride, Arya. It's about practicality. Volkov has military-grade security. This isn't sneaking into a warehouse or a gala. This is a war zone. Then teach me how to fight in one. Her voice was steel. You said we were partners. Partners don't abandon each other when things get hard. For a long moment, Jae-hyun stared at her, clearly weighing options. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Really smiled, warm and almost proud. You're either very brave or very stupid. You've said that before? And you still haven't proven which one. He gestured toward the back room. Fine. But if you're coming, you train. Now, we leave at sunset. The next 8 hours were brutal. Jae-hyun's head of security, a woman named Song, who looked like she could break concrete with her bare hands, put Arya through a crash course in tactical operations. Close quarters combat, weapon handling, situational awareness. Every lesson delivered with minimal words and maximum efficiency. You won't become an expert in one day, Song said, watching Arya practice disarming techniques. But you can learn enough to not get killed immediately. Maybe. Inspiring, Arya gasped, sweating through her 3rd hour of drills. I'm not here to inspire. I'm here to keep you alive long enough for Jae-hyun to do his job. Song demonstrated a defensive move again. Remember, in a real fight, nothing is fair. Use whatever you have. Keys, phones, your teeth if necessary. The goal isn't to win, it's to survive. By the time sunset approached, Arya's body ached in places she hadn't known existed. But she'd learned the basics. How to hold a gun properly, how to move through a building tactically, how to fall without breaking bones, how to breathe when terror tried to steal her air. Jae-hyun found her in the armory, checking the magazine on a handgun Song had deemed her training wheels weapon. He'd changed into tactical gear, all black, looking every inch the dangerous man he was. Ready? He asked. No. Arya holstered the weapon. But I'm going anyway. Good answer. He handed her a Kevlar vest, helped her adjust the straps. His hands were efficient, impersonal, but Arya felt the weight of the gesture. This was trust. Dangerous, fragile trust. They drove north in an unmarked SUV, Jae-hyun behind the wheel, 2 of his men following in a second vehicle. The city gave way to suburbs, then to forest, the landscape growing darker and more isolated with each mile. Volkov's estate is 300 acres, Jae-hyun said, breaking the silence. Main house, 2 guest cottages, and a security building. He keeps at least 20 guards on rotation, all ex-military, cameras everywhere, motion sensors, attack dogs. You're really selling this, Arya said dryly. I want you to understand what we're walking into. He glanced at her. There's still time to turn back, to let me handle this. Would you? If our positions were reversed? He was quiet for a moment, then, no, I wouldn't. Then stop asking me to be smarter than you are. That got a genuine laugh, brief but real. Fair enough? They parked 2 miles from the estate, approaching on foot through dense forest. Arya's training kicked in automatically, watching where she stepped, controlling her breathing, staying low and quiet. Jae-hyun moved like a ghost beside her, utterly silent despite the undergrowth. The estate appeared through the trees like something from a movie, sprawling mansion, lit up against the night, looking almost beautiful if you didn't know what it housed. Jae-hyun signaled his team to spread out, covering different approach vectors. The security building is our first target, he whispered. We take that down. We blind their cameras and communications. Then we can move on the main house. And Volkov? We'll either run or fight. Either way, we end this tonight. He checked his weapon. Stay behind me. Do exactly what I say. And if I tell you to run, I know, I run. Arya touched the emergency beacon on her wrist. I've got it. They moved toward the security building, a low concrete structure hidden behind perfectly manicured hedges. Jae-hyun's men took out 2 guards with silenced weapons, dragging the bodies into shadows. Arya tried not to look, tried not to think about the fact that people were dying because of her choices. The security room was staffed by 3 men watching multiple screens. Jae-hyun breached the door with practiced efficiency, his team neutralizing the guards before they could raise an alarm. Minjun immediately went to work on the computer systems, fingers flying across keyboards. I need 5 minutes to loop the feeds and kill their communications, he said. You have 3. Jae-hyun was watching the door, weapon ready. Arya moved to the screen, studying the layout. The main house showed multiple heat signatures on the second floor, Volkov and his people, probably in some kind of meeting. The guest cottages were empty, but something caught her eye on the far screen. There, she said, pointing. That building in the back. What is it? Minjun zoomed in. Storage facility, according to the building plans. But the thermal imaging showed something else. Bodies. Lots of them. Too many to be guards. That's not storage, Arya said, her stomach turning. That's holding. He has people there. Jae-hyun looked at the screen, his expression darkening. The next shipment. He's keeping them here until he can move them. We have to get them out. After we deal with Volkov, No, now. Arya met his eyes. That's why we're here. Not revenge. Not justice. Them. We get them out first. For a moment she thought he'd argue. Then he nodded. Minjun, how long until you can unlock that building remotely? 30 seconds. More typing. Got it. But the moment those doors open, their alarms will trigger. You'll have maybe 2 minutes before the whole estate knows. Then we better move fast. Jae-hyun signaled his team. Change of plans. We split. Song, take Arya and 2 men to the storage building. Get those people out and to the extraction point. I'll handle Volkov in the main house. You can't take the main house alone, Arya protested. I won't be alone. I'll have half the team. He touched her face briefly, unexpectedly. Trust me, I'm very good at this. If you die, I'm going to be extremely angry. Noted. He almost smiled. Go. Save them. Song grabbed Arya's arm, pulling her toward the door. They ran through darkness, the estate's perfect landscaping becoming an obstacle course. Behind them, Arya heard the first sounds of gunfire. Jae-hyun engaging Volkov's men at the main house, creating a distraction. The storage building loomed ahead, metal and windowless. Song's team breached the door, and Arya followed them inside. The smell hit her first. Unwashed bodies, fear, desperation. The building was divided into makeshift cells, chain-link fencing creating cages, and inside them, dozens of people. Men, women, some barely more than children, all of them staring at the armed strangers with terror and desperate hope. We're getting you out, Arya said, her voice surprisingly steady. All of you, right now. Song's men were already cutting locks, opening cages. The freed captives stumbled out, some crying, some silent with shock. Arya helped a young woman who could barely walk, supporting her weight. How many? She asked Song. 43. More than the intel suggested. Song was coordinating evacuation routes on her radio. We have transport waiting a mile north, but we need to move fast. Alarms were screaming now. The whole estate lit up like a war zone. Gunfire echoed from multiple directions. Arya pushed down panic, focused on getting people moving. They were halfway to the tree line when the explosion hit. The main house erupted in flames, windows blowing out, the shockwave knocking Arya to her knees. She looked back in horror, seeing the structure collapse, fire reaching for the sky. Jae-hyun, she breathed. Keep moving! Song grabbed her arm. He knew what he was doing. Our job is to get these people safe. But Arya couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The house was an inferno. No one could survive that. Then, through the smoke and chaos, she saw figures running, Jae-hyun's team, carrying someone between them. And leading them, covered in soot but very much alive, was her husband. Relief hit so hard Arya nearly collapsed. Jae-hyun reached her, his face streaked with blood and ash, his expression grim. Volkov? She asked. Dead, along with most of his security. He looked at the freed captives, something flickering in his eyes. You got them out. We got them out. Arya touched his arm, needing to confirm he was real, solid, alive. Are you hurt? Nothing that won't heal. He turned to Song. Get everyone to the extraction point. We're leaving. Now. They moved through the forest like refugees, 43 freed captives and a team of criminals who'd just committed murder and arson. The SUVs were waiting, along with 2 transport vans. People piled in, silent or crying, clinging to each other. Arya climbed into the lead vehicle beside Jae-hyun, her hands shaking with delayed adrenaline. They pulled away from the burning estate, sirens wailing in the distance as emergency services responded to the inferno. Where are we taking them? She asked. Safe houses, different locations. My people will get them medical care, documentation, help them contact families or find new ones. Jae-hyun was driving fast but controlled. Then they disappear. New lives, clean slates. Just like that? Just like that. He glanced at her. You thought I only destroyed things? I rebuild too, just selectively. They drove through the night, dropping people at various locations across 3 states. Each time, Arya watched them leave. Broken people getting a second chance because she and Jae-hyun had been willing to burn down an empire. By dawn, they were back at the Brooklyn safe house, alone except for minimal security. Arya sat in the shower until the water ran cold, washing away blood and ash and the weight of what they'd done. When she emerged, she found Jae-hyun on the balcony, watching the sunrise. Volkov won't be the last, he said without turning around. There are others, more powerful, more connected. I know. Arya stood beside him, exhausted but somehow calm. Let them come. You sound different, harder. Maybe I am. She thought about it. Or maybe I always was. I just didn't have permission to show it. Jae-hyun looked at her, really looked. What you did tonight, in the storage building with those people, that wasn't about revenge or justice. That was mercy. Mercy is just another form of power, Arya said. The power to give second chances. Is that what you want, a second chance? She considered the question. Her father was in federal custody, facing life in prison. Celestia would join him. The empire they'd built was ashes, and Arya was married to a criminal who'd helped her burn it all down. I don't want a second chance at my old life, she said finally. That person, invisible Arya, she's dead. I killed her when I exposed my father. Then who are you now? I don't know yet. She turned to face him fully. But I know I'm not your hostage, not your victim. And if we're going to stay married, it needs to be real, a choice, not a business arrangement. Jae-hyun was very still. What are you saying? I'm saying that somewhere between the wedding and tonight, this stopped being survival and became something else. Arya's voice was steady despite her racing heart. I'm saying I choose this. Choose you. Choose being the person who fights instead of hides. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you could have let those people die and just killed Volkov. But you didn't. I know you risk everything to dismantle trafficking networks when you could just profit from them. I know you're dangerous and ruthless and probably irredeemable by most standards. She paused. And I know I trust you more than I've ever trusted anyone. For a long moment, Jae-hyun didn't respond. Then he reached out, touching her face with surprising gentleness. You're either very brave or very stupid. I know. Arya caught his hand. But I'm also right. Maybe. He pulled her closer, his expression unreadable. This life I lead, it's not safe. It's not legal. People die. Enemies multiply. There's no happy ending. Good thing I'm not looking for happy, just real. Jae-hyun smiled then, genuinely smiled. Real I can do. He kissed her. Not like the clinical press of lips at their wedding, but something deeper. A promise. A claim. A choice. When they broke apart, Arya felt something settle in her chest. Not peace exactly, but purpose. Her phone buzzed. She almost ignored it, then saw the caller ID FBI. Ms. Bennett, this is Agent Chen. We need you to come in for debriefing. There are questions about the Volkov incident. What incident? Arya kept her voice neutral. The estate fire in the Catskills, multiple fatalities. We have reason to believe you may have information. I was in Brooklyn all night. My security footage will confirm it. She glanced at Jae-hyun, who nodded. Min-jun's work, no doubt. Is there anything else? A pause. Your father wants to see you. He's requesting a meeting. Arya's stomach tightened. No. Ms. Bennett, tell him I have nothing to say to him. Not now. Not ever. She ended the call. Jae-hyun raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? Completely. Arya felt no doubt. He was my father, but he was never my family. And what am I? She thought about it, about partnership and trust and the strange intimacy of shared violence.
about choosing each other in the wreckage of everything else. "You're my accomplice," she said. "My partner, my husband," he finished. "For real this time. For real." They stood on the balcony as the city woke up around them. Two people who'd married as strangers and become something more through fire and blood. Below them, Brooklyn hummed with morning routines and ordinary lives. Above them, the sky turned from gray to gold. Arya's phone buzzed again. More news alerts, more calls. The world still wanted answers, still demanded explanations for what she'd exposed. She turned it off. "What now?" she asked. "Now?" Jae-hyun pulled her close. "Now we disappear for a while. Let the FBI clean up the mess. Let your father's trial run its course. Let the world forget about Arya Bennett. And then? Then we come back. Different. Stronger." His voice was steel wrapped in silk. "And we finish what we started. There are still networks to dismantle. Still people who need saving. Still empires that need burning." "You make it sound like a crusade." "Maybe it is." He kissed her forehead. "You wanted real, Arya. This is real. Messy and dangerous and probably impossible, but real." She thought about the people they'd freed tonight, about the ones still trapped in systems designed to devour them, about the power she'd discovered in choosing to be visible, to fight, to burn down the structures that thrived on silence. "Then let's do it," she said. "Let's burn it all down and build something better from the ashes." "Something better," Jae-hyun echoed. "I like the sound of that." They went inside, leaving the balcony and the sunrise behind. There would be time later for plans and strategies, for identifying targets and building networks. For now, there was just this moment. Two people who'd found each other in chaos and chosen to stay. Arya's old life was gone. Her father's empire was destroyed. Her sister would spend decades in prison. Everything she'd known had been burned away. And yet, standing in this safe house with a man who was equal parts criminal and savior, Arya felt something she'd never felt before. Free. Not invisible. Not useful. Not necessary. Just free. The world outside was already spinning the story. Some called her a hero. Some called her a traitor. Some called her Jae-hyun's victim. None of them understood the truth. She wasn't anyone's victim. Not anymore. She was the woman who'd exposed an empire, who'd chosen mercy over revenge, who'd married a monster and found a partner instead. She was Arya Kang. And her war was just beginning. 3 months passed like a held breath, the world spinning its narratives while Arya and Jae-hyun built something new in the shadows. They moved through safe houses like ghosts, always 2 steps ahead of the media circus that still chased the Bennett scandal. Her father's trial dominated headlines. Celestia's cooperation with prosecutors made front pages. But Arya herself had vanished, and the world couldn't decide if she was victim or villain, hero or accomplice. She didn't care anymore what they called her. The safe house in Vancouver was their 4th location, perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific. Arya stood at the window watching winter storms roll in, her reflection ghostly in the glass. Behind her, Jae-hyun worked at a makeshift command center, coordinating operations across 3 continents with the efficiency of someone conducting an orchestra. "The network in Prague is secured," he said, ending a call. "That's the last of Kozlov's European operations. They're all shut down now." "How many people?" 16, all relocated, new identities. He joined her at the window. "The one in Singapore will take longer, more complicated infrastructure." Arya nodded, processing. In 3 months, they'd systematically dismantled what remained of the trafficking network her father and Celestia had built, not with exposés or FBI raids, with precision, stealth, the kind of justice that happened in shadows and left no witnesses. "Agent Chen called again," she said. "5th time this week." "What does she want?" "Testimony against my father. She says my statement could make the difference between life in prison and the death penalty." Arya's voice was flat. "She doesn't understand that I don't care what she gets." "Do you want to testify?" She thought about it, about standing in a courtroom facing the man who'd sold her like property, about having the final word in his destruction,
The idea held a certain appeal, but also exhaustion. No, she said finally. They have enough evidence. They don't need me. Then we stay disappeared. Jae-hyun pulled out his tablet, showing her something new. But there's something you should see. Minjun found it buried in the files we recovered from your father's safe. The document made Arya's blood run cold. It was a contract, dated 6 months before the wedding, between Senator Richard Bennett and Kang Jae-hyun. What is this? She read the terms, her stomach sinking with each line. This says you agreed to marry Celestia in exchange for political protection? Access to East Coast smuggling routes? She looked up at him. You told me you were planning to destroy him. This says you were partnering with him. I was doing both. Jae-hyun's expression was carefully neutral. The best way to destroy an empire is from inside. I needed him to trust me, to give me access. The marriage was the key. So everything, the courtship, the negotiations, all of it, was a lie from the start? Not everything. He took the tablet from her. I didn't lie about wanting to dismantle the trafficking network. I didn't lie about needing someone who understood how his empire worked. What I didn't know was that Celestia would destroy it first, or that you would turn out to be one. What? Arya's voice was sharp. More useful? Better leverage? More real. Jae-hyun met her eyes. Celestia was part of the con. You were never supposed to be involved. But when you offered yourself as replacement, when you chose to fight instead of hide, everything changed. Arya wanted to be angry, wanted to feel betrayed, but she'd known from the beginning what Jae-hyun was. A criminal, a manipulator, someone who planned every move 3 steps ahead. She'd married him anyway, chosen him anyway. Why are you showing me this now? She asked. Because we're done hiding. Because in 3 days, your father's trial concludes and he'll spend the rest of his life in a cell. Because the people we've saved are building new lives. He paused. And because you deserve to know everything, not the sanitized version, the truth. The truth that you manipulated me from the beginning. The truth that I manipulated everyone, including myself. He moved closer. I thought I was using you. I thought this was just another operation. But somewhere between the warehouse in New Orleans and the estate in the Catskills, I stopped pretending. Pretending what? That this was temporary. That you were a means to an end. That I didn't. He stopped, something flickering across his face. I've spent 15 years building an empire on calculated moves and strategic alliances. But you weren't calculated, Arya. You were chaos. And you destroyed all my plans in the best possible way. Arya stared at him, processing this admission. You're saying you actually care about me, not because I'm useful, just because. I'm saying that I'm in love with my wife. Jae-hyun's voice was quiet but certain. And I don't know what to do with that information. The words hung between them, raw and unexpected. Arya had braced herself for betrayal, for revelation that she'd been a pawn all along. But this was something else entirely, something that felt dangerously like truth. You're in love with me, she repeated. Apparently. He almost smiled. Inconvenient, isn't it? Extremely. But Arya felt something warm unfurl in her chest, something that had been growing in the spaces between violence and survival. Because I'm in love with you too, and I don't trust easy emotions. Neither do I. Jae-hyun reached for her hand. So what do we do about it? Before she could answer, the security alarm shrieked. Jae-hyun was moving instantly, weapon drawn, checking feeds on his tablet. Arya grabbed her own gun, muscle memory from months of training taking over. 4 vehicles, Jae-hyun said, his voice clipped. Coming up the access road fast. FBI? No, private security. He zoomed in on the lead vehicle. Shit, it's Marcus, her father's head of security, the man who'd overseen countless operations, who knew every secret, every buried body. Arya's stomach dropped. Why would he come here? Only one way to find out. Jae-hyun was already issuing orders into his comm unit, his team mobilizing. But we're not taking chances. Get to the panic room. Now. I'm not hiding. Arya. He grabbed her shoulders. I can't focus if I'm worried about you. Please. Just this once. Let me handle it. She wanted to argue, wanted to stand and fight, but she saw the fear in his eyes, quickly masked, and realized this wasn't about her capability. It was about his. Fine, but if shooting starts, I'm coming out. Deal. The panic room was disguised as a wine cellar, accessible through a hidden door in the kitchen. Arya descended into the reinforced space, monitors showing multiple camera angles. She watched Jae-hyun position his men, watched the vehicles arrive, watched Marcus step out alone, hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I'm unarmed," Marcus called out. "I just want to talk to Arya." "She's not here," Jae-hyun replied, his weapon trained on the older man. "Yes, she is. I know she's watching right now." Marcus looked directly at a camera, as if he could see through it. "Arya, please, I have information you need to hear. It's about your sister." Arya's finger hovered over the comm button. She shouldn't trust this. Marcus had been her father's creature for 15 years, but something in his voice made her hesitate. She pressed the button. "I'm listening." "Not like this. Face to face." Marcus's expression was grim. "What I have to tell you, it changes everything. And I have maybe an hour before people start dying because I'm here." "That sounds like a threat," Jae-hyun said. "Unshumped. It's not. It's a warning." Marcus lowered his hand slowly. "Your father isn't the top of this operation. He never was. And Celestia's cooperation with the FBI? It's a performance. She's still running her network from inside custody. She's planning something big, and Arya is the target." Ice flooded Arya's veins. She looked at Jae-hyun through the monitors, saw his jaw tighten. He met the camera lens, a silent question. She nodded. "Search him," Jae-hyun ordered. "Thoroughly, then bring him inside." 5 minutes later, Arya emerged from the panic room to find Marcus seated in the living room, surrounded by Jae-hyun's men. He looked older than she remembered, tired, almost broken. "You have 5 minutes," she said. "Talk." "Your father's trial concludes in 3 days," Marcus began. "The prosecution is confident. They're going to get their conviction. Life without parole, probably. But 2 weeks ago, Celestia made a deal. Full cooperation in exchange for witness protection and a reduced sentence." "I know all this," Arya said impatiently. "You don't know why." Marcus leaned forward. "Celestia didn't just steal $400 million in intelligence files. She stole something else. Something your father kept hidden even from his closest associates. The complete roster of everyone involved in the trafficking network. Not just American operatives. International. Government officials in 15 countries. CEOs, judges, military officers. People with real power." Arya's stomach turned. "How many names?" 372. Marcus pulled out a USB drive. "And she's been using them. Not to expose them. To control them. She's built a shadow organization more powerful than anything your father ever had, and she's been coordinating it from federal custody." "That's impossible," Jae-hyun said. "She's in maximum security. No contact except through lawyers. Her lawyers are her operatives." Marcus set the USB on the table. "This drive contains everything: communications, financial transfers, operations still running in 8 countries. And the final piece, her plan to eliminate the last threat to her empire." "Me," Arya said quietly. "You and everyone you've freed, every person you've relocated, every identity you've created, every safe house you've established. She knows about all of it." Marcus's voice cracked. "She's planning a coordinated strike. 73 targets, simultaneous hits, in 48 hours. The room went silent. Arya felt the weight of it crushing down. All those people, all those lives she'd tried to save, about to be destroyed because she'd underestimated her sister. "Why are you telling us this?" Jae-hyun asked. "You worked for their father for 15 years. Why betray them now?" "Because I have a daughter." Marcus's hands trembled. 19 years old, studying abroad in Prague. One of Celestia's cells grabbed her 3 days ago. She said, "If I didn't track you down and deliver you to her, my daughter dies." He looked at Arya, his eyes wet. "But I can't do it. I can't give her another person to destroy. So I'm giving you this instead. The information you need to stop her, and I'm begging you to save my daughter before Celestia realizes what I've done." Arya looked at Jae-hyun. His expression was unreadable, but she knew that calculating mind was already spinning through options. They could run, disappear again, let the 73 people die and save themselves, or they could fight. One last time. Against impossible odds and certain death, she already knew which choice they'd make. "Where is she being held?" Arya asked. "Prague. Underground facility in the old quarter, guarded by Celestia's people." Marcus pulled out a map. "But I have access codes, security schedules, everything you need to get her out." "And Celestia?" Jaehyun asked. "How do we get to her?" "You don't. She's untouchable in federal custody." Marcus paused. "Unless you can prove she's still running operations. The USB has evidence, but it needs to be delivered to the right people. People who aren't on her payroll. That list is very, very short." "Agent Chen," Arya said. "The FBI agent who keeps calling. She wasn't part of the original investigation. She came in after the gala." "Then she might be clean." Jaehyun was already moving, issuing orders. "Minjun, analyze that drive. I want every piece of intel verified. Song, start coordinating protection for all our relocated people. Camille, reach out to our Prague contacts. We need extraction plans for Marcus's daughter within 6 hours." "And me?" Arya asked. Jaehyun turned to her. "You're going to do what you do best. You're going to make your sister's secrets public. Again. But this time we do it right. No leaks. No uploads that can be intercepted. We hand everything directly to Agent Chen with enough evidence that Celestia can't talk her way out." "She'll know it was Marcus," Arya said, looking at the older man. "She'll kill your daughter." "Not if you get to her first." Marcus stood, his exhaustion visible. "I'm not a good man. I've done terrible things for terrible people. But I'm still a father, and if there's any chance you can save her, I'm taking it." Arya thought about her own father, about the empire he'd built on broken lives, about the daughter he'd sold without hesitation. Marcus wasn't that. He was trying, desperately, to be better. "We'll get her out," she promised. "And then we're going to end this. All of it." The next 48 hours were a blur of coordinated chaos. Jae-hyun's Prague team extracted Marcus's daughter in an operation that involved false police raids, bribed officials, and enough violence to make international news. She was scared but alive, reunited with her father in a safe house in Berlin. Meanwhile, Arya worked with Minjun to compile the evidence from Marcus's drive into a presentation so damning, so thoroughly documented, that no amount of legal maneuvering could dismiss it. Communications between Celestia and her network, financial transfers, orders for executions. Proof that she'd been running a criminal empire from inside federal custody for 3 months, and at the center of it all, the 73 names, people Arya had saved, people Celestia wanted dead. "We need to move them," Arya said, staring at the list. "Warn them. Get them somewhere safe." "We are," Jaehyun replied. "But it's not enough. Even if we relocate everyone, Celestia will keep trying. She has resources we can't match. The only way to stop her is to remove her from the board entirely. She's in federal custody. We can't exactly break in and kill her." "No, but we can make sure she never gets out." He pulled up a file on his tablet. "Agent Chen isn't just FBI. She's part of a task force investigating corruption in the federal prison system. If we give her proof that Celestia has been running operations from inside, that prison officials are on her payroll, it becomes a national scandal. Celestia gets transferred to a facility where she has no influence. Maximum isolation. No more operations. And the people she's already sent after the 73? We eliminate them first." Jaehyun's voice was ice. "Simultaneously, before they can strike." It was ambitious, probably impossible, but Arya had learned that impossible was just another word for difficult when you had resources and rage in equal measure. "Let's do it," she said. They called Agent Chen at dawn on the day her father's trial was set to conclude. She answered on the second ring, sounding surprised and cautiously hopeful. "Ms. Bennett, I'd almost given up trying to reach you." "I have information," Arya said, "about my sister, about operations still running, about corruption inside the federal prison system. But I'll only give it to you directly, face to face, and it has to be today." "That's a tall order. Agent Chen, my sister is planning to execute 73 people tonight, former trafficking victims who've been relocated and given new lives. If you don't help me stop her, they die." Arya's voice was steel. "So I'm asking,
Are you actually interested in justice or just in closing cases? A long pause, then, where and when? They met in a parking garage in downtown Vancouver, the kind of location that felt cinematic and dangerous. Agent Chen arrived with 2 other agents, all of them armed, all of them wary. Arya came with Jae Hyun, carrying the USB drive and a folder thick with printed evidence. "This is everything," Arya said, handing it over. "Communications, financial records,
Proof that Celestia Bennett has been running a criminal organization from inside federal custody. Proof that guards and officials at her facility are on her payroll, and a list of 73 targets she's planning to hit in 6 hours." Agent Chen's expression shifted from skepticism to horror as she reviewed the contents. If this is authentic, it is, Jae-hyun confirmed. "We verified every piece. Your forensics team will confirm it." "Where did you get this?" "From someone inside the operation who wanted out," Arya said. "Someone who chose his daughter over his loyalty. That's all you need to know." "And what do you want in return?" "Protection for the 73 people on that list. Immediate transfer of my sister to a facility where she has no influence. And prosecution of everyone on her payroll." Arya leaned forward. "I want my sister to spend the rest of her life alone. No power, no control, just walls and silence." Agent Chen studied her for a long moment. "You know, if we move on this, you'll likely be called to testify. Against both your father and sister. You won't be able to stay hidden anymore." "I know." Arya had thought about this. About stepping back into public view, about facing the cameras and the questions and the judgment. "I'm ready." "All right." Agent Chen closed the folder. "I'll need a few hours to verify this and coordinate with our teams. But if this checks out, we move immediately." "You have until 6 p.m., Jae-hyun said. "After that, people start dying." They left the parking garage in separate vehicles. Back at the safe house, Arya paced while Jae-hyun coordinated with his teams across 8 countries. The plan was precise. The moment Agent Chen confirmed she was moving on Celestia, Jae-hyun's people would strike at her network simultaneously, dismantle it completely, leave nothing standing. At 4 p.m., Agent Chen called. "It's verified, all of it. We're moving on your sister now. Federal marshals are executing a transfer order, and I've got teams protecting your 73 people." "And the people she sent?" "Already in custody. We picked them up an hour ago. Coordinated arrests across 4 states. Chen paused. "Your sister is finished, Ms. Bennett. It's over." Arya felt something release in her chest. Relief. Exhaustion. Something that might have been grief for the sister she'd never really had. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Thank me by testifying. I'll need your statement, both of you." Chen's voice was firm. "This doesn't mean you're off the hook, Mr. Kang. We have questions about your organization, too." "I expected nothing less," Jae-hyun replied. "We'll cooperate. On our terms." The call ended. Arya sat down heavily, suddenly aware of how tired she was. 3 months of running, 3 months of fighting, 3 months of being someone new, and now it was done. "Your father's verdict comes down tomorrow," Jae-hyun said, sitting beside her. "They're predicting life without parole." Good. Arya didn't feel triumph, just emptiness where a family should have been. And Celestia? Maximum security, solitary confinement, no contact except through monitored channels. She'll die old and alone in a cell. He took her hand. "It's not the dramatic ending you might have wanted, but it's permanent. It's enough." Arya leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. "What happens to us now?" "That depends." Jae-hyun tilted her face toward his. "You said you wanted this to be real, a choice. So I'm asking. Knowing everything you know now, all the manipulation and strategy, all the blood on my hands, do you still choose this? Choose me?" Arya thought about the woman she'd been 4 months ago. Invisible. Useful. Desperate. She'd married a stranger to survive and found a partner in the chaos. Had learned to fight instead of hide. Had discovered that mercy and violence could coexist in the same heart. "Yes," she said. "I choose this. All of it. Even the impossible parts." "Then we build something new." He He kissed her softly. Not an empire, not a network, just a life. Complicated and dangerous and probably messy. But ours. Ours, Arya echoed. I like the sound of that. 6 months later, Arya stood in a courtroom in Manhattan, preparing to testify against her father. The trial had been delayed multiple times, appeals filed and dismissed, but now the moment had finally arrived. Senator Richard Bennett sat at the defense table, looking smaller than she remembered, diminished, already defeated. When she took the stand, their eyes met. She expected to feel something, anger, sadness, the ghost of daughterly love. But there was nothing, just emptiness where he'd never really existed in her life. She testified for 3 hours, detailed the operations she'd helped hide, named the people who'd been trafficked, described the system that had destroyed so many lives while masquerading as charity and political service. She didn't cry, didn't falter, just spoke the truth in a voice steady with conviction. When she finished, the prosecutor asked one final question. Ms. Kang, do you have any regrets about exposing your father's empire? Arya looked at the jury, at the packed gallery, at Jae Hyun sitting in the back row, waiting for her. Only that I didn't do it sooner, she said. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Life without possibility of parole. Richard Bennett would die in prison, his legacy reduced to ash and infamy. Celestia's trial followed 2 months later. She tried to bargain, tried to manipulate, tried every tactic that had always worked before. But the evidence was overwhelming. The testimonies damning. She was sentenced to 40 years in maximum security. By the time she was eligible for parole, she'd be 70, ancient, powerless, forgotten. Arya attended neither sentencing. She'd given her testimony and moved on. There was too much work to do to waste time watching them receive their punishments. The foundation she built with Jae Hyun started small, just a handful of people working to help trafficking survivors rebuild their lives. But it grew steadily, funded by the legitimate portions of Jae Hyun's empire and donations from people who'd read Arya's story and wanted to help. They provided housing, counseling, job training, legal assistance. Everything Arya wished had existed when she was invisible and desperate. They called it Second Sight Foundation, for people who'd been overlooked and were finally being seen. Arya ran it from a small office in Brooklyn, her face no longer hidden. She did interviews, spoke at conferences, used her visibility as a weapon against the systems that thrived on silence. People called her brave, called her a hero. She didn't feel like either. Just someone who'd survived and decided to help others do the same. Jae Hyun had dismantled the criminal portions of his empire, piece by strategic piece. He couldn't erase his past, couldn't undo the blood on his hands, but he could choose what came next. His organization became something else, legitimate, legal, focused on security consulting and asset recovery, using his skills to help instead of harm. They lived in the penthouse where it had all begun, the fortress that had once been a cage. But now the doors were always open. Now people came and went freely. Now it was a home instead of a prison. One evening, Arya stood on the balcony watching the sun set over Manhattan, the city painted in shades of gold and amber. Jae Hyun found her there, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Chen called, he said. The Prague operation was a complete success. They shut down the last of Kozlov's network, arrested 16 people, freed 37. That's good. Arya leaned back against him. How many does that make? Total, since we started? He calculated mentally. 412 people freed, 8 major networks dismantled, and 0 active operations remaining from your father's empire. 412 lives, 412 second chances. It wasn't redemption, wasn't enough to balance the scales, but it was something. Marcus called too, Jae-hyun continued. His daughter graduated top of her class. She wants to work with us, help with the foundation. What did you tell him? That we'd interview her like anyone else, no special treatment, he paused. But that we'd be lucky to have someone with her experience and motivation. Arya smiled. Marcus had become an unexpected ally, using his knowledge of criminal networks to help them dismantle them. He'd never be clean, never be forgiven for the years he'd spent enabling atrocities. But he was trying. That counted for something. I testified at 3 trials this month, Arya said. Each time it gets a little easier, like exercising a muscle. That's because you're finding your voice. Jaehyun kissed her temple. The invisible daughter is gone. You're someone new now. We both are. She turned in his arms. Different than we planned. Better, maybe. Definitely better. He smiled and it reached his eyes in a way it never had when they first met. Though I do miss the dramatic chaos sometimes. Don't worry, I'm sure someone will try to kill us eventually. We've made a lot of enemies. Looking forward to it. He kissed her, slow and deep. As long as I have you watching my back. Always, Arya promised. They stood on the balcony as night fell, watching the city light up like a promise. Below them, millions of people lived ordinary lives, unaware of the war that had been fought in their shadows, unaware of the empire that had been destroyed, the lives that had been saved, the quiet revolution that had happened while they slept. Arya thought about the girl she'd been, the one who'd stood in a cathedral preparing to marry a monster, the one who'd been sold like property and chose to fight instead. That girl was gone, burned away in the fire of her own making. In her place was someone stronger, someone visible, someone who'd learned that mercy and violence, love and rage, survival and sacrifice could all exist in the same heart. Arya Kang. Not Bennett, not invisible, not anyone's pawn, just herself, complicated and scarred and impossibly alive. What are you thinking about? Jaehyun asked. Endings, she said, and beginnings, how they're sometimes the same thing. Is this an ending? No. Arya looked out at the city, at the lights and the shadows, at the ongoing battle between corruption and justice that would never truly end. This is the part where we get to work. Because there were still networks to dismantle, still people to save, still empires that needed burning. The work would never be finished. Evil was persistent, adaptive, endlessly creative in its cruelty. But so was hope. So was choice. So was the decision to fight instead of surrender. Arya had been invisible once, had been overlooked and underestimated and sold like merchandise. But she'd taken that invisibility and forged it into a weapon, had learned that the people society ignored were often the ones with the clearest view of its corruption. Now she was building something better. Not perfect, not pure, but real. A foundation for people like her, for the invisible ones, for the fighters who'd been told they were too weak, too damaged, too broken to matter. She'd proved them wrong, one person at a time, one life saved, one system destroyed, one empire burned to the ground. Jaehyun had asked her once if she was brave or stupid. She'd never answered. But now, standing in the wreckage of everything she'd destroyed and everything she'd built from the ashes, Arya finally knew the truth. She was both. Brave enough to fight impossible battles, stupid enough to think she could win. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what the world needed. The city stretched out before them, infinite and indifferent. Tomorrow would bring new fights, new enemies, new people who needed saving. But tonight, Arya allowed herself this moment of peace, this breath between battles. She'd been sold as a replacement bride, had married a monster and found a partner, had destroyed her father's empire and built something better from the ruins. Her story didn't have a neat ending, no fairy tale resolution, no happily ever after. Just the promise of tomorrow, and the choice to keep fighting. That was enough. Arya Kang turned away from the balcony, Jaehyun's hand in hers, and walked back into the life they'd chosen. The one they'd carved from chaos and blood, and impossible love. The invisible daughter was dead. Long live the queen.